Alright, so this is the review for the Unit 1 test. It's 50 questions, multiple choice. There's a little bit of matching in it as well. Let's see, we're starting out. I'm just going over the test directly. Make sure you know latitude and longitude and how to find both. Make sure you know the difference between the Western Hemisphere, Eastern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, and Southern, and of course where we live. And then for elevation, trying to find an elevation of a location, you need to use a physical map. More specifically, it would be a topographical map or a topo map. Relative location has to do with where you are in relation to something else, or where a building is in relation to something else. So, like Marcus High School is a quarter mile south of Sonic. Something like that. So you use something that people do know where it is, and then you relate it to something they don't know. So that way they can kind of get an idea where something is located. You need to know about Pangaea. Pangaea was the supercontinent, and then it slowly broke apart and split apart due to plate tectonics over time. You need to remember that increase in elevation decreases temperature. For about every 1,000 feet you go up, temperature drops between 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And then weather. Weather is, as far as definition, it is what's going on in a particular place during a particular period of time, usually like a short period of time. So, you know, like today, what's going on today, or something like that. So over a short period of time in a specific location. You need to remember the different zones of latitude. You have the tropical zone, the mid-latitude, and the high latitude or polar region. The mid-latitude is where you have the temperate zone, which is what we're in. That's where you see moderate climate. That's where you see all 4 seasons, things of that sort. In the tropics, it's humid and hot all the time and rainy. And then, of course, in the polar regions, it is cold majority of the year. And then, and of course, with that, also remember what kind of vegetation you'd see in the different ones. So, like, for example, back in the tropical region, you would see broadleaf trees or deciduous trees, whereas in coniferous would be in the polar regions or anywhere high up in elevation in the mountains. So it could be in the temperate region like in Colorado, but way up high in elevation to where it's basically the same as the polar region. And then you know that water erosion is a type of physical weathering which could create things like canyons. You remember what rain shadow is? That's where you have rain coming in or moisture coming in from the ocean hitting one side of the mountain, and then it doesn't quite make it over the other side of the mountain range, and it creates a shadow effect, rain shadow effect, to where there'll be a desert on the backside because no moisture can make it to that location. Then you need to know the difference between the fault boundary zones, divergent, convergent, and transform. Divergent plates are moving away from each other, convergent plates are hitting each other, and then transform, they're sliding next to each other. The one that's least likely to see an earthquake is divergent because they're not building up tension, they're moving away from each other. Whereas in convergent and transform, you'll see the most earthquakes. Also, under convergent, you could have subduction occur, which would create volcanoes, pushing magma up to the surface and up through openings in the surface. And then there's a few different climate zones you need to know about and what they're like. So tropical wet, for example, obviously be in the tropics, obviously humid, rains most of the time, thick vegetation, hot pretty much all year long. And then semi-arid, this would be like West Texas before you get into the desert. Not very much precipitation, 10-15 inches a year, somewhere in there. Hot summers, winters are generally mild, and pretty much dry all year. And then Mediterranean climate. Mediterranean is hot summers and dry as well. Winters are cool, so like 40s, 50s, but that's when it rains most of the time, so the rainy seasons during the winter. Areas that's located is obviously around the Mediterranean, mainly the northern Mediterranean, around Europe, so like Greece, Italy, Spain, Croatia, other small countries there in the Balkans, as well as Southern California, around San Diego, LA, and then some regions of Australia next to the ocean. And then tundra. Tundra is generally flat, treeless, freezing cold, not much precipitation. So the snow and ice you see could be from literally 100 years ago. So not too much precipitation, just stays there. While we have 4 seasons on the Earth, that's because of the tilt of the Earth. We tilt at 23.5 degrees. And of course, our orbit around the sun goes in such a way to where one hemisphere gets more sunlight than the other, causing the seasons. The Ring of Fire is around the Pacific Rim, meaning around the west side of North America, South America, and then up over towards Asia, like Japan, North Korea, South Korea, along the China coast, and then down to Southeast Asia and Australia, New Zealand, and all that. And that's where you see a lot of volcanic activity and earthquakes. That's where the majority of them are. And of course, tsunamis. And then continentality. As you move away from the ocean, further away you are from the ocean, you're going to get further away from the moderating effects of the ocean. So it's not going to really affect the climate that much. So if you're really like in the middle of a continent, far away from the ocean, then the extremes in temperature can be quite drastic. So Siberia would be the one where you'd see the most extreme temperatures. Like I said before, you can get down to -60, -80, below zero. So obviously very extreme because of its distance away from any ocean. All right, yeah, one more. Perceptual region. A perceptual region, with first period, I forgot to go over this with you. A perceptual region is something that people perceive, basically, like what is the South? The South, some people see as the Confederate States, some people see as like Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana, but not Texas, and also Tennessee and all that. So a perceptual region is how people perceive things. So depending on like people's view of what the South is going to change what states they think should be included in it. All right, epicenter. An epicenter is the center of an earthquake. It's where it originates from. Also, you need to know that we are in a humid subtropical climate zone. That's where we are, North Texas, and because of that, we have a grassland prairie. So you don't see as many trees, and you see a lot of grass. All right, and then I need to know the lithosphere. That's the ground, basically the crust of the earth. The hydrosphere is all the water, so that includes up in the clouds, in the sky. All the lakes, rivers, streams, oceans, table water, all that kind of stuff. Groundwater. Biosphere is where all living organisms live, so that's the sky and in the ground, and then atmosphere, of course, is all the gases surrounding the earth and where the weather occurs. Right, and then in the southwestern part of the U.S., where we have a deserty area, it's pretty arid. The main economic activity that happened in a place like that would be livestock. Obviously, you're not going to see farming, you're not going to see fishing, or forestry because there's no trees. You need to know about human-environment interaction. Human-environment interaction is how we obviously interact with the environment, how we adapt to it, or how we change it to fit our needs. So like damming up Lake Louisville and creating that lake so we'd have more drinking water, or like urban sprawl here in Flower Mound, and really the whole metroplex as it spreads north and takes over more land, it changes the environment around us. Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. That is a collection of all sorts of data that comes together and geographers are able to use on the computer. They're able to pull up a map and put layers on the map so they can see different types of information depending on what they're looking for. Kind of like Google Earth, how you can add and take away layers on Google Earth to look up whatever it is you want to see. All right, glaciation, that is when a glacier carves out, erodes land as it moves. That's called glaciation. Chemical weathering, good example of that would be rust. After something oxidizes and then begins to rust. Fault lines are where tectonic plates meet and hit each other. Climate, that is the conditions of an area over a long period of time, so usually over several years. Map distortion, what that means is that whenever we draw a 2D map, the continents are distorted. Like, for example, the one I always used was Greenland, looking much larger than it really is. You know, looking larger than South America, even though it's much smaller. And then let's see here. And then a 3D representation of Earth. That's a globe. That's easy. Another one that should be a gimme is Africa. What is it? It's a continent. Too many kids say country. But it is a continent. There's about 64 countries in Africa. And then you know that tsunamis occur after earthquakes. So when there's an earthquake in the ocean, there is a obviously a higher chance of a tsunami. Really, the only other thing that causes tsunami would be like an asteroid hitting the Earth. So obviously, earthquake is going to be the main thing that causes it. All right, so that's the Unit 1 test. If you just watch this video over and over and over again, and look over your notes and stuff like that, you should do perfectly fine. Like I said, it's multiple choice with a little bit of matching. And I will see y'all tomorrow.